think we're just a few minutes in here, so we can go ahead and get started. Again, welcome. I'm Carlin Maludis. I am the VP of Customer Success over here at Sentispec. Today we'll be discussing with our lovely group of panelists here, warehousing and transport in the age of artificial intelligence. So we've got quite a few questions that we already prepared and are ready to jump into the discussion. But of course, as you have questions that you want to get answered, especially as the conversation is flowing, please provide those in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll definitely do our best to get to those. And let me just hop over to the next slide. Quick overview of our agenda. I'll introduce our panelists here, and then we're just going to jump right into things and tell you a little bit more of where some of our panelists are coming from. We've got Fabian Bodenbender, and he is coming from Transporeon. He's the head of sales over there for Central Europe. He's got tons of experience, particularly in freight and logistics and optimization in that space. Joining us from Langebæk Consulting is Erik Fridlund. He's got a ton of experience himself, coming from warehouse operation and optimization too, in particular with establishing new warehouse operations. Then from my home team, we've got Danielle Bourn-Damm, who's representing Sentispec as our product manager here. So of course, she's specializing on the tech side, responsible for our lovely roadmap and all of those product feature requests and planning over here at Sentispec. And then last but not least, we have Andreas Claudi joining us, also from Sentispec. If you joined our webinars before, you might have seen him a few times here. He is our founder and CEO and comes from more than 20 years of experience, not to date you, Andreas, delivering across technology with particular specializations in research and development and artificial intelligence particularly. So we've got a great group here representing tech, representing AI, and that combination within warehousing and transportation and logistics as a whole. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. Right away, we're going to start around disruption. So for this group, where have you seen the biggest disruption in day-to-day warehouse operations based on AI, maybe in the last 3 years? Maybe Erik, would you like to kick us off with your thoughts and perspective?
Yes, of course. Yeah, you can see, I would say from my perspective, I come from warehousing and a lot of, automation, which is quite nearly connected to AI. But I would say there's a lot of, when it comes to inventory and picking efficiency and those kind of areas, and also forecasting to help the warehouse operation, which are, a lot of things that happened for the past years. So that is my, spontaneous thing that I would say.
Makes a lot of sense. Maybe Andreas, your thoughts around where you've seen a lot of disruption in recent years.
Yeah, for sure. I would probably second the e-commerce picking, packing operation, the returns operation around that, with fully robotized operations, which is now doable on smaller goods. I'd say where we might have expected, but we haven't seen, is that permeate really into palletized goods. That is coming now to some extent, but it's different from what we've seen in e-commerce.
Great. And when it comes to maybe the transport side, Fabian, is there anything that you're really picking out over the last few years here, particularly what's really disrupting on transport, especially as it relates to AI?
I mean, looking at the business process side and not so much about the match of the physical and the digital world, there have been a few applications or processes in that world where we saw AI upcoming, and it started a few years ago with the predictive ETA part. So where basically a machine predicts when a truck will arrive, which was then really a disruption in that regards, that good recipients first time could plan basically when the arrival of the good happened and could schedule their production schedules and their resourcing accordingly, which is a game changer. And there are a few more interesting things upcoming in that area, I would say.
Definitely. When it comes to specific technology, again, in the realm of artificial intelligence, what specific technologies do you see having the biggest potential? So we've thought a little bit of the past 3 years. What do you think's coming in terms of productivity and efficiency gains in a modern warehouse here?
There's a lot you can say, of course. There's a lot of warehousing. Have potential for optimization and robotic and all that kind of stuff that comes with that, high base or shuttles or whatever it could be. But I think there's just a big potential in the VMS that most warehouses have today to actually optimize manual warehousing with the VMS and using potential AI there to make that more efficient.
And do you think certain technologies may be more beneficial to certain types of warehouse operations then, thinking in the future?
Yes. Yeah, of course it would be that. Probably I want to give an example of what it could be. I think there's a lot of, it's depending on what kind of process you are, how the organization look, and how mature you are to actually to adapt that and understand how to do it and how to use your technology. So of course it is the technology in itself, but you really need to understand your processes and and try to implement it in a good way.
Makes a ton of sense. Maybe from the Sentispec side, is there anything in terms of technology specifically that we're seeing or we're planning for as one of those AI technologies ourselves? Either Andreas or Danielle.
Do you want to go first, Danielle?
Sure. I think that we're seeing now that companies are having more access to data than ever before. And so they're going to be able to make these data-driven decisions rather than eyeballing it or flying blind. So actually looking at the data and using that to guide their decisions, whether that's with route planning or stock taking, anything really. Andreas, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. Anything that has to do with automation, IoT, and AI and computer vision will impact the individual warehouses. We're seeing that right now. We're rolling it out. It has a massive impact. I mean, you're looking at 5 to 10 minute savings per container load, for example. Right? It's massive value potential for the individual warehouse using primarily AI and computer vision. But then you take that individual impact and you extract the data from that operation and you start being able to do systemic changes, right? So you can start comparing one warehouse performance to another warehouse performance. You can start from a managerial level, getting access into data and a level of transparency that you've never had before into some very core operation, right? Every time you move a pallet in a warehouse, we will know it in our systems, and we can now start extracting insights from those raw data and give that to managerial levels. And that is the second level of impact that we see. So you get the both impacts, the operational benefits directly in the warehouse and terminal, and then the systemic impacts as well.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that totally speaks to the potential that's living there. So it sounds like computer vision is a real focus there that's a bit more applicable maybe to a lot of the warehouses versus some of the other technologies that we see. Also high potential, but maybe a bit more specialized. Great. Moving right along. Oh, this is a great one for the group. Are there any specific learnings from your perspectives that you would like to share, particularly when it comes to deploying AI solutions in a warehouse? So when you're helping those warehouses or transport terminals get started, anything like maybe each person, if there's one learning that you would love this group here today to take away, what would it be? Let's start with Fabian.
Well, as I don't do the implementations of the AI solutions at a warehouse, I don't want to take a wild guess here, but I think a key learning of any of such initiative is usually being prepared, doing a great change management. So communicating on what you're doing is key, but also being aware that structured and good quality data is key. And I think that's the same for warehousing project as it would be for a transportation management project. since all the AI models are trained with data, and if that data is not good enough or not sophisticated enough, you will struggle in implementing any of those solutions. So I guess that's the same for both. But maybe Andreas and Erik have a different opinion on that.
Yeah, but I definitely agree when it comes to, data and change management, that is super keys and important. But, when it comes to implementing, for example, big optimization projects, there's you really need to understand, why are we automated and what should we automate, or what should we implement it. And of course, there's a lot of technology, and you need to try to understand how actually to do that. So try to go to the root, and there's a good why you are doing it, so you don't sub optimize something that maybe not that needed of it.
I think sorry, Danielle, you want to go?
Go ahead. Maybe I can add to you.
So I think Erik's point there, the why is important. Start with the business case is the one thing I do. And we do that every single time. Start with the business case. Which process or processes are you trying to optimize, and what's it worth? Very simple.
What I was going to add to that is having a great shiny product is not enough. It's also so important to be hands-on with the people who are using it, ensuring that the staff are trained and comfortable with the new technology that you're introducing. So important.
Definitely. I think a lot of us get caught up by the shiny new thing, particularly when it comes to AI. But it's really nice to hear this group here. I know we called this a panel debate, but this just sounds like a panel consensus at this point, that change management and getting your people on board and explaining the why and not just the what is super key into deploying AI solutions. Really appreciate all of your perspectives on that one.
It's hard to argue
already. We talked already about the disruption around transport management, but is there anything this group would like to add around that? Just in general, what we've seen in terms of that disruption, just based on AI or just technology in particular in recent years, or anything you see to come on that front?
Sorry, you go,
Andreas.
Fabian.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the one thing, and it's hard to say this without plugging one of our products, but the one thing no one knows is how full are my trailers and containers. No one really knows it. Sure, you know it on the point where you close the door, but no one knows it consistently, organizationally, at scale. We have a customer that ships 5,000 trailers a day. There's no way that you can manually collect consistent data of how full they are and make any sort of sensible determination around that. We have a system that allows you to measure the fill rate of every single vehicle that leaves or arrives, and that we think is a huge disruption. The customers that use it are reporting insane numbers back, like 5 to 10% decrease in number of vehicles to carry the same amount of load capacity. 5 to 10%. If you run 5,000 vehicles a day, that is a rather large amount of money you're saving, right? And this has just started now, but we're seeing more and more. Interestingly, both the 3PLs are looking for this, but in particular, we're seeing manufacturing customers who are very emissions conscious, pushing the 3PLs to know how much load is in every load they transport for them. Right, both for emissions reasons and for cost savings reasons. And that dynamic is going to just get worse, right? And everyone, and I imagine at some point, legislation will be introduced to reinforce this and ensure that actually this is measured and verified, that we don't waste space. Sorry, Fabian, you
No, for sure. And adding to that point, I mean, it's estimated that like 30 to 40% of all trucks are driving empty. So I think we all have a huge interest in a higher truck utilization once from an emission standpoint. But what I also find interesting about it, and since Andreas, you are a lot on that business case side also, interesting for me would be what is the potential on labor in the warehouses, because of it's not only the driver shortage, which we are particularly facing in transportation and transport management, but I could also imagine that it hits you in the warehouses as well, pretty much, since workforce is no longer available in the quantities we would require them. Also going through this transition, having a lot of insecurity about it, whether I should take a job as a warehouse man or not, or am I basically rationalized by a machine tomorrow? So that would be very interesting to me to know what is your perception on that.
Definitely. Was that a question for Erik?
For Erik or for Andreas, man, you are doing that kind of projects, and you know what's going on the market in that regard. So it would be very interesting to get to know that a bit.
Specifically on the implementation part or the business case part?
On the business case part, when that's up and running, what kind of potential could you estimate from that?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. We have a deployment up in Finland, about 3 or 4 terminals up there. And on one of those terminals, fairly small terminal, they run 10 routes, right? 10 vehicles a day. And within 3 weeks of deploying the system, they had reduced that by 1 route. That's 10% savings right there to carry the same load. It is frighteningly simple. And here, I know the terminal manager quite well. She's a super nice person, very, very capable. What she was doing to try and right size her capacity was every single day she'd sit at the video management system and look through security camera videos for hours a day to try and figure out how full her vehicles were. She did that every single day. And then our system came along. She did the taking of the pictures of all the vehicles. 2 or 3 weeks later, boom, I have reduced my cost base by 10% permanently. She actually called me, I think it was last summer, and she was like all happy and energized because a customer had called her and said, a customer that was running 2 vehicles a day. I mean, it's small numbers, right? But still, it in that context, it's quite large for her. 2 vehicles a day, this customer was running. And he called her up and he said, I need you to run another vehicle for me because I've got this extra load, right? And she then went into our portal and looked at, okay, so these routes that I have with this guy, where they're going to, what kind of load run them, and so on. And she came back to the customer saying, look, the amount of load that you want transported, we actually have enough capacity in the vehicles that we currently service you with. Well, that's crazy, right? Because she's not making money that day, but she has a customer that comes back to her every single time he has a need. So when we talk about the business case effect, it's what we find is it's very often very much larger than we actually calculate. In this case of this terminal, it's like a factor of 2 or 3 larger. So I don't know if that answered the question, Fabian, or at least gave some color to it.
It at least gives an impression on what that actually means, what the impact of that could be.
And this is real money, right? 1 route costs 125,000 euros a year.
Indeed.
Okay. So you've just reduced your operating budget by 10%.
Yeah, and I think from a warehouse perspective, there's a lot of manual stuff happening in what we talking about outbound areas, and how that should be planned in a good way so it fits all the trucks and all that kind of stuff. And there's, I think, it's a big potential there because it's always regarding picking or what's happening in the that's important, but it's happening a lot in the outbound area, and it could be a lot of travel on time for forklifts or whatever. If you don't plan it that well, you have too much or too little or whatever it could be. So I think there's a lot you can do there. That it's in the area for when the transportation starts.
Definitely. And is there anything, I know we've talked a bit about the business case and just the disruption in general and what that looks like financially or reduction in the different routes that you're planning, but is there anything more on the sustainability element maybe that's disruptive here too that AI is playing a role in across your different functions?
I mean, the AI itself can help in order to do that, in order to reduce CO2 emission. Maybe as an example, If you're doing large freight procurement exercises over various countries and modes of transports, you always can pick and choose between different options. Do I just go by truck? Do I use the railroad? Do I invite 3PLs carriers which are using already environmental friendlier transportation solutions? And now coming to the complexity, having 30 sites in Europe, for example, and then doing the transportation management to that, it is a very difficult task to find out a good allocation scenario. And having all the data available and the AI available, helping us in making a decision, we can use their tools to calculate for us what is the impact in using an environmental friendly solution. How much CO2 can I save if I go for that scenario instead of any other? So there are already playgrounds on a very high strategic level, but indeed, at the end of the day, in order to really push down the emission, especially looking at transportation, it's basically bringing the physical technology and the AI together to, for example, having the most efficient truck driving, because of the AI know how to steer the motor of the truck best in order to have the less impact. This is where then that solution come in place on a very physical technical level, basically.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. We actually just got a related question from the audience here. What about the use of AI when it comes to highway monitoring systems that could potentially let companies get a live recalculation, for example, of the trip time or additional costs related to some issue? Do you see that application coming to the forefront at some point? Or maybe that could be an IoT model, the participant rights.
So interestingly, a number of mapping providers already use this kind of information. It's not all countries where you can get public access to it, but you take the UK, for example, around the M25 around London, the live data on traffic is already available, which is extracted from the cameras. Public access to all of the cameras is probably there's some issues with that. Not cheap, but certainly getting the data. We're already seeing that's being made available to the public in quite a few cases, and something like Google Maps will already be using that, and a number of freight and transport systems already pull that kind of data in.
And this is also some of the application or use cases we talked about before. It's predictive ETA, so providers get the telematics data, so the driving data from the truck, and then make their calculation based on traffic, weather, or whatever is taken into account to the system in order to exactly do what the participant here is describing, to get out how long will the trip take finally, what is the predicted time of arrival, but also then to find out what could be additional cost because of longer standing times, for example, at a certain warehouse. So that's already a real life use case.
Definitely. Super cool. When it comes to freight procurement now, how has this side of logistics been disrupted? Maybe this is a bit more for Erik on this side.
I would say that I don't have worked that much regarding that from my experience, but of course there's always a capacity problem trying to find capacity, get the right carriers and so on to fix that. But I would say that to be honest, I don't think I have that much of a good answer. This is not my special area, so I can't make something up.
No worries. Anyone else have some thoughts on the freight procurement side? Anything you're seeing trend-wise, maybe from the Sentispec group?
Well, I think when you look at freight rates and how they've been going up and down, for sure, the access to dynamic data and interpretation and forecasting of that data has clearly improved. Whether it qualifies as disruption or an incremental improvement, I suppose that's a discussion to be had. But certainly, with the volatility in freight rates, has been more important for the last few years than ever for anyone doing transportation, either as a supplier or as an acquirer of it, to be aware of the fluctuations in freight rates to get the best deal.
Yes, indeed. Rate prediction is a huge topic, and observing market. But also, if you look at the two basic models of freight procurement, so usually you have a spot freight procurement, so day per day procurement, but there's also a lot of contracted and long-term strategic procurement. And in strategic procurement, we see AI impacts where it's a very manual process. So you need to define strategy, you need to gather a lot of data, you need to set off your rate sheets, how you want to gather and how you want to analyze that. There's still a lot of work to do, but one thing the AI can especially do there for us is get fragmented supply chain data from different data sources together to one cohesive and holistic picture. You can then basically put as a scenario to the market, and having clarity and transparency on that, connecting the data sources is very, very important in that field, but also having rate predictions and benchmarks of the market. Looking at the other part of freight procurement, so spot freight procurement, day by day, basically we see huge developments in regards to AI, where basically a machine already can take over that task from a dispatcher, at least for standard operations, which is a huge efficiency gain for dispatchers in that kind of process. So this is very much ongoing today.
Awesome. We've got a two-parter here from both the transport and the warehouse sides of things. Is there a certain size of operation or size of the business where AI becomes applicable? Or can smaller businesses use this to have an edge against larger businesses because they can move faster and move more nimbly when it comes to using AI? From the warehouse perspective, I think we've talked a lot about transport now, so maybe shift gears onto the warehouse side. Any thoughts here? Is there a threshold we need to meet for AI to become especially applicable to improve operations?
I think it's hard to get a straight line exactly where that goes, but I think you can use, AR or automation it's more of a level of degree. Okay, how much can I actually do, a percentage of automation? But of course, the bigger your operation is, it's easier to find a good business case. But just for example, to have a good VMS and try to work with all those kind of stuff, and try to get help with make that more efficient. Of course, small operation, it makes a big difference also. So I think I would say it depends a little bit on what kind of how the operation is working and so on. But I don't think we should see a limit in the size of your operation.
Makes sense. In your opinion, what do you think wins out? The smaller business who's able to move quickly and maybe go through quicker procurement and get moving on these AI solutions? Or is it, as you mentioned, those larger businesses who might have more of a proven business case to get started?
It depends a little bit on, the why are you doing it? And of course, it can be both pros and cons depending on, but it can be huge business cases, but there's a lot of big companies who's not that mature in data or don't have the system support that is really needed. So if you have that in a smaller company and you can make fast decision, well, then you have a huge potential. But of course, so it depends a lot. It's maybe a little vague answer, but I think you always should go to the why and why are you doing it, and then that why is always unique to your situation.
Definitely. And what has Sentispec seen on this side? Have we seen everybody thriving? Maybe those larger business cases, more of that nimble
No.
movement?
There's a movement in the market, and I think we were speaking about e-commerce earlier. We have a number of cases where apparel manufacturers, Nike and Adidas and so on, who then start pushing their 3PL partners to do warehousing in a different way to optimize the e-commerce workflows. And they might require monthly stock takes. A monthly stock take of a full 100,000 square meter warehouse. That is a costly operation. And the 3PLs who can figure out how to do that kind of operation, that's just one example, there are many others, that can do that operation cheaper, will have achieve a higher level of consistency and accuracy if you can do it in an automated AI-based fashion as compared to manual, and do it better, and you can do it a lot cheaper if you automate it. And that's just stock take. And that means that when you then go back into the market, whether you're at small scale or large scale, actually now you have a competitive advantage because your cost to serve is lower than your competition. Right? So what we're seeing is we're seeing some smaller companies doing it successfully. There is less scale, but they're able to move faster, whereas the larger companies will move slightly slower, but the scale benefits will be astronomical. I mean, we have customers reporting about 5 to 7% productivity improvements across all the warehouses where they deploy the technologies, right? That's an insane level of improvement. So you have kind of both, and you get slightly different results out of them. Also because the smaller players, their biggest challenge is the scale, but then you then have to counter that with being cheaper, quicker.
Definitely. Danielle, did you have some thoughts? I saw you on mute there.
I guess one benefit, regardless of if the company is big or small, is while we're developing these technologies, we're working really closely with our customers. And so whether it's our largest company we're working with or the smallest, they're having input on the technology that's being built, which comes with its own advantages as well. Their needs are being heard and directly being put into the product. So that's another angle of it from a product management perspective.
True. And I mean, to your point, maybe there could be some room for specialization as AI continues to develop in the logistics space, where some might focus more on those smaller organizations or on those huge monoliths that we all know and love. That's a good point. Great. Okay. According to some recent studies, about a third of all truck drivers are over the age of 55, and just 5% are under the age of 25. This is also applicable just across logistics. I think I recently saw a statistic that only 4% of Gen Z are interested in actively pursuing a career in logistics as a whole. So we definitely are already experiencing, but even more potential for a bottleneck when it comes to capacity, but particularly on the transport side, but also on the warehousing side when it comes to actually getting people involved. How do you see AI solutions mitigating this problem across warehouse and transportation when the people might not be there to do the job?
So I can start on that one. I can see Erico has asked around autonomous cargo and autonomous vehicles for transportation. I think those two are intertwined, but not necessarily in the way we might expect. So answer number one here is use the capacity you have better. Right? As Fabian mentioned, a good deal of trucks are running around empty, so we can start by using that capacity. Obviously, immigration is part of the answer in one way or another. Autonomous vehicles, unfortunately, are not really. Okay, this may be controversial, but we are a long way, both from a regulatory standpoint, but also from a technology standpoint. We are a long way away from safe autonomous vehicles with the same capability as humans have in terms of driving. For highway driving, it is slightly easier, but it is not an easy problem to solve. It is insanely hard to solve. And that means before you arrive at autonomous vehicles that can operate on highways at highway speeds and get on the off ramp and drive to its destination and get regulatory approval for that, an optimist would say 5 years. The realist would probably say 10 to 15. So this is not going to solve it in the short term, maybe in a slightly longer term. Just a basic fact, the compute capacity that you have in a standard vehicle is nowhere near enough to do the kind of deductions that a human brain does. Not even close by a long shot. So that's kind of, I'm sorry, slightly depressing, but I think there's much more to gain in actually using the capacity we have smarter. I think there are some innovations that one could look at around the use of rail systems for transport more extensively, which I think could have a massive impact.
I agree, actually. When it comes to, AGVs and stuff like that, forklifts going by themselves, there are a lot of cases, but there's quite a long way to go to be there. And there's a lot of technology that's coming into warehouses and do a lot of good things, but it's still, there's more, it's a level of degree of how you can automate something or put in a technology and try to, use your capacity in a better way. But then, people do other stuff, kind of becoming operators and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think to everyone's earlier point around that change management and the why behind doing this could also potentially retain a lot of employees that might be otherwise considering an exit from logistics to stick around and make those tough parts of their job a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Yes, and I need to agree. It's at the end of the day, AI will just help us to mitigate it. It is the mixture of politics and society as well as technology in order to resolve that. And yeah, AI will just partially do that for us, looking for autonomous vehicles and stuff like that. We will see certainly some development, and I'm more maybe on the optimistic side, but for that part, we might want to see first like platooning solutions or railroad solution for the long term, for the long runs, but in fine distribution in the cities. I think as well, it's rather unlikely we see that very quickly, but it has some potential, and it will go into that direction just because of the lack of capacity, and that's why it's the job of all of us to be more respectful with the drivers, to make their lives easier, and to make best use out of that, because of that's a quite limited resource, as we all know.
Definitely, and it's certainly not a problem that we're going to solve here today. It's quite complex, just hearing your different perspectives for sure, but it's really nice to get your perspectives on that front. Is there, pivoting, I guess, to impact versus where we've seen past trends or future potential, when it comes to impact on transport management and particularly freight procurement, this is probably one for you, Fabian. Where are you seeing that in the near term and long ahead?
I mean, as said, there is already impact in that particular part of transportation management and freight procurement. We already see the first highly automated solutions in that. Short term, definitely, I see good ways or attempts for market predictions, benchmarking, such like things, market transparency, data consolidation, and medium term, we will see that a buyer in such a process is heavily supported by a machine, working from unstructured data to structured data, being supported in his scenarios, his recommendations, and how he allocates, how he treats the business, what is his perfect mixture between strategic buying and spot procurement. So this is all things we will see And then the question is, what is the long term for that? I mean, the long term game might be the complete autonomous IoT world. What impact has that for business processes? Are we actually then going for long-term contracts, or will we follow a way of mini transactions where a self-regulated market basically automatically aligns capacity and demand? That could be one vision for that, but looking at today and predicting what is the long term for that is rather difficult, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like the concept of the mini transaction. I think that could be really, really important in the near term. When it comes to AI tech, do we see already, knowing that this is pretty new, right, for logistics to really be grabbing hold of AI and putting it into operations across the supply chain, but are we starting to see that competitive advantage coming for those early adopters of those that you've worked with across warehousing and transport?
Absolutely. I mentioned Nike earlier, so one of our customers is housing Nike goods in their warehouse, and Nike demands 5 warehouse stock takes every year, which translates into doing like 1,000 locations a day or something. And now our customer has implemented that, done it very well, increased the accuracy of the warehouse, and being able to service their customer better. On the back of that, they win another 3 warehouse deals. So, it's like this turned out to be a really good idea for them. There's an automotive who is demanding fill rates from another of our 3PL customers. They come to us and say, hey, can you deliver those fill rates? And we go from the small pilot on one site to now discussing 23 sites across Europe for full deployment, where they get live updates on every single fill rate on every single vehicle. So this helps our customer create a relationship with their customer, in this case, an auto manufacturer, which no one else can compete with, because no one else has that capability. No one else has created that relationship with the customer of intimacy around getting the shared value from that. So this is happening right now, and there's definitely over the next couple of years going to be winners and losers in this.
And it looked like for the last 10 years, when a lot of companies, if you don't look at AI specifically, have put in a lot of technology that has helped quite a lot. And then now we're, stepping into a new era where AI also will be a part of, warehousing and also transportation. So yeah, it's of course gonna play a competitive part as done with a lot of technology from the past.
Definitely. And the second half of this question, have any of you experienced customers or anything who have paid for some early mistakes, maybe investing in some technologies that didn't quite work out how they may have hoped? Everyone loves a good horror story.
Well, I have 2 pet peeves. One is self-driving or autonomous vehicles, and the other is stock-taking drones. And a lot of people have gotten burnt by that because it's simply too expensive.
Why is it that the drones haven't worked, Andreas?
There's a number of reasons for that. Commercially, the cost of procurement and deployment and maintenance of these systems typically outweigh the business case. From a deployment perspective, it is very slow and hard to scale because it's a very lengthy deployment process just for a single warehouse. That means if you have 100 warehouses, then that scaling is kind of annoying. And then there's a technical problem, which makes it worse. Well, there's a number of technical problems, but one of them is indoor autonomous navigation is extremely hard. You end up having to navigate by radio beacons, which in a building made out of concrete and steel and typically filled with pallets, very often with foodstuff, which is full of water. It's a nightmare. From a technical standpoint, it's a nightmare. That means you add more hardware to compensate for that, making it more expensive, eroding the business case even further. So we know of several of the very largest 3PLs have banned almost even the mention of the word stock-taking drone. Others are still forging ahead, and they, I suspect, will learn from those mistakes as well. Sorry if anyone in the audience is in that business, but I'm not a fan.
Awesome. Thanks for that. One question from the audience, bringing it back to the positive side of things, let's say. Where do you see the biggest financial gain with AI in your respective areas? So we can go down the line, maybe starting with you, Erik, in the warehousing space.
Yeah. I would say the most one, I would say, you know, their technology in general can make a huge impact. And then when it comes to AI, it's still a little bit, from my perspective, a little bit uncertain exactly how that's gonna be in different technology. But you know, I know for when it comes to stock taking and inventory, which is a huge, you know, it costs a lot of money, and it's quite easy to use that kind of technology and combine it with AI. I think it's that's a pretty low hanging fruit. I would say spontaneously.
Definitely. What about you, Fabian?
I mean, looking at procurement for my part, especially in spot procurement, you would have two levers where AI would basically be very beneficial, which is one, productivity gains because of standard tasks are being done autonomously by the machine at the end of the day. So massive gains in how to produce your service or what you do. And the second thing is then the external savings, basically. So you are on the market and you buy a rate today as a manual process, and tomorrow you do that with an AI, which can take into account much more variables than you would be able to do as a human, which then has a huge impact on external, so market driven cost savings. I mean, that methodology could be applied to anything else. So if you are eager to save CO2 emissions, then that model could for sure also apply to that.
Definitely see that. And then on the Sentispec side, where are we seeing those financial gains?
I'd say the systemic optimization of route capacity. So simply reducing the number of trucks and containers you need to transport the same volume. As I mentioned before, 5 to 10% cost reduction on what is a huge cost factor.
Makes sense. We've talked a lot about AI. Let's talk about people. What do you see as the role of people playing in the future of logistics operations?
A little bit about it earlier and mention it. I think, you know, when warehousing is, you know, changing a lot, and then there's a lot of technology coming in, there's going to be a lot more of operators and people who understand the technology and what's more or less happening and try to, you know, set the right settings in the system and parameters and so on. So I think that is one concrete thing that's happened the past years, I would say.
I am a firm proponent of 80% automation. There are some things that machines do really well, which is tedious, repetitive, high precision tasks, like reading barcodes. And there are things humans are really good at, which is dynamic, changeable operations that require adaptability, like driving a truck, driving a forklift, those kinds of things. So the fully automated that you do in e-commerce is not really going to work in palletized backbone supply chain and trunk. This is where you are going to augment the human and take away some of the sources of errors, like hand scanning and so on. Take that away from the human, automate that, but please let the human drive the forklift. He's far better at it.
I mentioned earlier about keeping customers kind of at the center of it. People are still the one who are driving the need and coming up with the creative problem solving for the challenges that they face. It can't be all put on machines. Machines are a tool to complete those problem solving techniques.
Awesome.
There's a question from Pelle. I love that question.
Yeah, this will be our last question because I want to make sure we can discuss where all of our lovely panelists are coming from and who they're representing today. So the last question we'll ask is coming from the audience. As a customer, what kind of demands should you make to 3PLs in order to make them compete in regards to reducing the transportation of air using AI?
What we have seen some customers do is a very simple thing. They just tell the 3PL, tell me the fill rate of every arriving and departing vehicle. And you will see the 3PL panic because they have no way of doing that. That's when they call us, by the way. But that's a shameless plug. Sorry. But it's very simple. Tell them to give you the fill rates because they can't. They will either panic and do nothing, or they will try and give you manual estimates, which at any kind of scale is pure nonsense. It doesn't work. It's never going to be consistent or accurate in any way. So they'll have to automate it.
Makes a lot of sense, especially just for that data consistency in general.
Yeah.
Yep. Fabian, anything from your side when it comes to folks trying to keep their 3PLs honest and make sure they're reducing that error?
I mean, in that kind of models, you can always work with a continuous improvement process, expecting a 3PL to deliver a certain kind of improvement, which could be truck fill rate, indeed. So reducing the total cost of ownership then overall for that kind of process or product. So that is always kind of commercial way you could go. But agreeing with Andreas, you need to have a certain database in order doing that, and then yeah, it's a matter of having a good process and a good system on the warehousing side, but also on the transportation side, in order to make something out of your findings. Because of if you just have the data and you know that, but you don't do something about it, or you're not capable of doing something with it, it will not help you at the end. So I think that's an important thing also to always consider. Just having data in masses and doing data science and all that stuff is on itself not very helpful if you don't then execute the consequences with it. And I think that's important.
Definitely. That data serves as the foundation and it's great to collect it, but you need to actually do something about it, as you said, and use those insights. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for answering all these questions and providing your thoughts. Definitely a lively discussion, and really appreciated myself hearing all of your different perspectives on these topics across warehousing and transport. Before we fully close, I would love to give our panelists the opportunity to just describe a bit about what they're doing and their perspectives here. So up first is Transporeon, so that will be Fabian taking us through.
Yes, thank you. So looking at the time, I will try to keep myself short. Maybe just shortly expanding on Transporeon, we are basically one of the largest logistics networks. And what we do is we do the digital handshake between a shipper and a carrier. And on that platform, both parties can use several applications, from freight sourcing over execution, real-time visibility, freight audit, dock and yard management, in order to do their business together. And that network connects, meanwhile, roughly 160,000 carriers and 1,400 shippers with more than 200,000 transports per day. So basically, that's the network, and that's the power of the network, where we deliver solutions to the industry and the 3PL and carriers. The solution I was been talking about today is indeed the solution we offer on spot procurement. So we basically establish a product, an AI-based product, which mixes two elements, which is one, data science, where we basically do rate predictions in order to estimate a price for a certain transport. And we mix that with behavioral science on the other hand. So it's an autonomous procurement process where the solution basically offers a price to a carrier to accept. So usual bidding process would be, I ask you, carrier, what is your price for the transport? And we turn that around based on the data we have and ask the carrier, are you willing to take the transport for a certain price, which significantly shortens the process on all ends because of it has rather less negotiations in it. It's not that biased as usual procurement process. And at the end of the day, it benefits both sides because of a carrier can utilize its capacity better and is able to accept an offer. So he's rewarded for his effort, which is a huge issue in freight procurement because of only one can take the load at the end and the others are just providing a quote. So this is quite powerful on that end, but also on the shippers end, you have some significant savings when it comes to the execution of that service. So it's that 80-20 Andreas mentioned. So we can automate basically 80% and leave 20% of the, let me say, more special cases to the dispatchers, which overall results in average between 9 and 12% savings for shipper customers. So which is huge. Looking at the scale you can do with that.
Amazing. Then we've got Erik representing Langebæk.
Yeah, thank you. We are a company that will have offices in Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. There's a lot of figures here, but we talk a lot about balanced logistics to find the balance to help our customer. Is it the cost or the growth or the sustainability that is the main focus? And we do that. Our main focus is to be very trustworthy and gain trust in our customer to help them with the journey. And then different parts that we actually do. We do a lot of supply chain network design. We are a lot heavy on automation and robotic, and there's we are a lot of time the speaking partner to help our customer to understand the technology, understand data and IT, and make it more efficient for them, and so they can get the right technology to their warehouse. And we also, you can see here what we do. We do some production logistic, and we're also into healthcare logistic, try to in hospitals and so on. And just the next slide is just, we work mainly in the Nordic, but we're out in Europe and also out in the world. But, so just we're on a lot of industries and, 2 big automation project we have recently done in Coop and Axfood in Sweden, who is one of the largest in Europe and the world when it comes to automation, and we have been the head engineers in those projects. So just a little glimpse of different customers and what we have done. So yeah, that's kind of Langebæk.
Great, thank you so much for that. A lot of heavy hitters in your customer list here. That's awesome. Last but not least, we've got the Sentispec group. So what are we doing over here at Sentispec? I'm curious.
I never figured that one out. I'll let you know. We basically do 2 things, right? We improve the operational efficiency of the individual warehouse and terminal, and we use that data to help with insights that generate systemic changes and improvements. We are based in Denmark, offices in a couple of places, and we're now operating in 10 countries across the globe. And that's a lot of fun. We have, as you can see here, a base portfolio of the individual products inventory for stock taking, increases your stock accuracy with the associated business case. You've inspector for the fill rate optimization, and then handler that tracks whenever you move a pallet, making sure you put it in the right place. And if not, then it tells the driver that pallet does not belong in that container going to China. It was meant to go to Argentina instead. But that's about it for us. Obviously, there's a lot of detail to this, but by and large, we try and work with our customers to create a business case and then go ahead with the deployment.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, everyone. It was really, really great discussion and appreciate all of your thoughts. And thanks to everyone who tuned in or is watching the recording afterward. Really, really good stuff here. I learned a lot about warehousing and transport every time. So thank you again, and we'll see you soon.